Hi, welcome to Mark Langley's Horsemanship Podcast. I'm Jenny Barnes.
And I'm Mark Langley.
Hi, Mark. How are you going? I gather you're now up in Queensland.
Yeah. I've did a clinic in Adelaide and then driven through the middle of Australia, up through the Strzelecki Desert into a little tiny town called Inaminka, then Thargomindah, and into southeast Queensland. So from Western Queensland, drove right through Queensland into southeast Queensland, where I'm now at the Noosa Equestrian Centre, which is they've hosted me at the last minute. They've managed to hire out their undercover arena here, which is great because the clinics I'm doing at the moment are all pop-up clinics due to all the clinics that we've cancelled throughout Victoria. So it's been great to be able to sort of find centres to be able to hire, and also to be able to sort of fill the clinics at last minute notice to keep the show on the road, I suppose.
Yeah, I imagine there'll be lots of people out there be happy to see you and get your help while you're up there. And you were just recently in South Australia working with a mule, I gather.
Yeah, being in Australia, we don't have a lot of mules. Like over the years, like in the years ago, there was quite a few donkeys around, but in Australia, we've sort of there hasn't been that sort of not a lot of people breed mules, so it's sort of very rare to see mules at clinics. But this lady breeds a few mules, and she brought a mule along, and I think on her standards, this was one of her sort of tougher mules in a sense of I guess his intelligence, but also he had quite a stoic side. But it was really interesting working with him and quite enjoyable. But I guess I really enjoy the challenges of new things and sort of horses and mules now with sort of little areas that you've got to really think about, and also challenge myself and challenge the person who owns them. So it's great.
Nice to get a bit of variety. All right, I'm going to start with the first question for you, Mark. It's from Kate. She says, what do you do if your horse doesn't react to the flag at all, no matter how loud you make it? There's been a couple of other comments from members as well saying that they have maybe used the flag too much as well, desensitizing, and would love to hear the answer.
Yeah, it is a tough one, and I come across it quite a lot, especially with the some of the colder blood horses that have had plenty of flooding in the past. And flooding's not just sort of education. Some people think, I've flooded my horse with a flag and I've done the whole sensitizing thing, and now the horse is quite desensitized when it's in this sort of certain environment, and I'm picking up things around it. Flooding is just a horse being flooded with a whole bunch of things in a human environment, from rugs to picking up their feet and things like that, and they become safe and unawares of danger and things like that. So they start to sort of just go, oh yeah. And the hardest thing, I guess, we have in training is to sort of get a horse to start to be thoughtful and a little bit self-motivated, and having a bit of a neutral anxiety is just a bit like neutral anxiety could be just like you're riding along and a kangaroo starts. I say kangaroo a lot. I know it's just one of those things that you sort of say, well, but a kangaroo might hop along in the distance or something like that, or you might hear a tractor or something, and the horse starts to get a little bit tense and start to look around a bit. And that's what horses naturally have in the wild. And after a while, there's all these things that we throw at them, and then eventually they dull to all those things. That there's no sort of danger in them, I suppose, and because we've kind of wanted them not to think that things that we have are dangerous. But what I've found is when the horses don't see any danger in anything around us, then people tend to apply a lot of pressure on their horses. They'll put a lot of push and force, and that's where they have to use that sort of driving to sort of motivate horses to do stuff. So when I'm training horses in the early stages, I don't want to make a horse quiet to everything I throw at it. I just want to know that the things I need to put on it, like saddle blankets and rugs, that it's okay with. But I want to sort of still have a natural awareness in them, and when it's been taken out of them, it is a little bit harder. So if your horse is very, not so sensitive to the flag, you can sometimes be a little bit random with it, as in, just pop it randomly, and could be completely different in where you're standing or where you put it, or whether you put it up in the air, and just try and maybe get big with it in a different place, and the horse will go, oh, what was that? I don't know what that was. And then you do it again, and the horse goes, oh, I didn't know what that was. I'm not sure about that. And then next time you just sort of move the flag a little bit, the horse will be like, oh, I better pay a bit of attention, because I'm a bit unsure what's happening around me. Now people might sort of question that and go, oh, well, you're stressing the horse a little to get it to learn. But if that little bit of anxiety is neutral, then your pathway of feel and your ideas are not such a bad thing for the horse, and you get a stronger connection, and also they get a stronger connection to the things that you're teaching them, like following a rein or something like that. So and actually on the last clinic, I'm one of the ladies who that I met, she in many years ago hosted Harry Whitney in Australia, and she was talking about his exploding box analogy, and it was a really good analogy in the sense, because I had someone else once upon a time try to explain it to me who'd spent some time with Harry Whitney or had been to one of his clinics, and I really had a hard job trying to understand it, but she explained it to me, and basically it's kind of what I'm trying to say about the flag, I suppose. But basically, if there was an exploding box and we knew about it, but the horse didn't know about it, then the horse is really going to freak out when that box explodes. But if we know about it, we're not going to freak out. But if the horse knows that there's a possible exploding box out there, then it stays aware in its environment. So when things happen, it's not going to freak out as much, but also it's aware enough to follow pathways and in our ideas, because its awareness level is up enough to take on all the information and search and make decisions and stuff like that. So I don't know if everyone can understand what I'm saying there, but that was a good analogy. And now I guess that's what having a horse aware and having a flag is there for, is to create an awareness so a horse can have that, so then it can search and things like that. So if you think of it like that, that's what the flag's for. But to get the horse sensitive is the hard one. So you can use other tools and stuff like that. So when you're out and you're sort of with your horses, and sometimes you can sort of maybe just lead them up a little faster, instead of sort of just walking across the paddock like you always do. You can lead them up just a little faster and say, hey, I'm in a bit of a hurry today, and I want to get over to that gate in a hurry, and oh, hang on a minute, I just dropped my watch, or I dropped something on the ground, and I better go again. And sometimes you can just get your horses a little bit more stimulated and motivated in your environment, so they start to naturally wake up a little bit, instead of just sort of go along at the normal pace that you go along. And sometimes not being random in a way that makes the horse mistrust you or anything like that, but just being sort of, I guess how I say that, just being not different so they don't trust you, but just a little bit more maybe busy, and the horse's mind goes, oh, right, I've got to wake up a little bit and pay attention. And then as you're sort of a little bit busy, you might have your flag, and then you might quickly pop it while you're doing something where the horse would have never seen you pop the flag at that time. So it would have maybe gone, oh, gee, what was that? You just popped the flag. And usually you don't pop the flag when you're doing that. And the horse wakes up just a little more and maybe pays a little more attention. And I think you can just kind of just do it in a way that is a little bit surprising for your horse, but not sort of crazy enough and overly random to get your horse to mistrust you or suddenly become frightened that you've completely changed. And I think if you sort of try and be a little bit more creative like that, you might get the horse interested in the flag a little more, or not interested in it, sorry, but more aware of it. So then when you pop it, it'll suddenly wake up into its normal environment. But if the flag's not working, you can throw it away and just basically be a little bit more, just get him thinking a little stronger about what he's doing, and that's being you may being a little more busy and changing some of the normal things that you do. I might lead you up the garden path by sort of saying all this, but I hope that kind of makes sense.
Okay, and then next question, I'm going to move on quite quickly because you've got a lot to get through. The next question is from Ivan. Ivan says, when you lead your horse, what is your preferred placement and why? I.e., is it at the shoulder or in front or somewhere else?
So leading horses, it's really like I lead horses in different positions for different reasons. So sometimes in education, I'll lead them in a certain position because I want to teach them to search forward. So sometimes I might get a horse to lead out in front of me, and that's so they can sort of lead out and take on the environment in front of us. So when I'm riding later on, they're used to that, and they're used to sort of, having me behind them and stuff like that. So, and then other times a horse that is really fractious and needs someone to lead it and needs a good leader, I'll lead out in front. But basically what I'm wanting or teaching horses to do is wherever I put the feel of my hand and that lead rope, they're happy to follow. So there shouldn't be any position that the horse gets used to. So it becomes like, oh, that's the position I always lead in. It should be, well, we just might place the horse out on that left side, or we might just place the horse out on that right side, or we might just ask it to come through and maybe lead out in front. But basically, as long as your horse is following the feel of a lead rope and you've taught it to follow that to wherever that goes, and it's kind of happy to place there, I think it's really important to be able to put the horse in all positions. But being mindful of the fact that if you're walking up a bit of an alleyway where there's something scary on the right, then you can always put you on the right side, on the side of the scary thing, and your horse could be on the other side, so nobody gets run over. So you're us knowing our horses and where they are at emotionally. I think it's important to sort of go, okay, predict the dangers. If we sort of walk up an alleyway and we're going to get run over, well, we put ourselves on the scary side and put our horse on the other side. So if we feel our horse starting to drift off a little and go, I'm really scared of that on what's over there, then we might just change the angle of our leading hand, swap hands, send them out the other side, like ask them to come out the other side and say, well, you just come on that side then, and we can always adjust where we're leading them. So I think you have to be very flexible with leading, and the horse is comfortable on both eyes and things like that. But education leading, well, you can you can say, well, I'd like you to lead here, or I'd like you to lead out in front, and that sort of thing. But there's no specific spot. It's just that, are they able and willing to be in any spot if we need to put them there?
We can hear the stallion, for everyone out there hearing that occasional bang, it's a stallion kicking something in the background. So,
that's all right. I'm just near some stables, and there's new horses, in paddocks that are arriving to the clinic and things like that. So there's a little bit of noise in the background, but being on the road, there's no sound studios for podcasts or anything. It's just ad hoc where we are, and yeah.
With everything that comes with it. Okay, the next question's from Carolyn. She was at your clinic in Perth. She went to it with a recently broken in mare who braces in the rein when you ask her to stop or even close the fingers on the rein. She's been using the techniques that she learned at the clinic, and they've been working really well. And she's just wondering, is there anything else that she should be working on?
So she's bracing in the forwards to backwards.
So she was working on the bracing, which was when she stopped. And when she, sorry, let me just have a look at that question again. She's been using the technique she learnt there to release the brace, and it has been working. The brace is occurring when she asks for a backup or a stop. Is there anything else that she should be working on?
Yeah, okay. So the biggest problem we're going to have, and we seem to always have, is getting a horse to let go of something. I think one of the most important things that we're teaching horses, or one of the most important things we're trying to understand and become very good at, is the effectiveness of getting a horse to let go of something. And the better and better a horse gets at letting go of something, the softer it becomes, in the sense of it's willing to take on a new idea. But to take on a new idea, it has to let go of that old idea. And some horses, well, all horses I've found is you know, you can ask a horse to back up and they take a couple of like rough, rigid steps and a bit of bracy steps, and then all of a sudden they sort of float backwards and continue floating backwards, and you go, geez, that's a nice back up, and you reward it. But you can reward that back up 1,000 times and still never fix the transition of the horse having a forward thought, then transferring that into a backward thought where the horse backs up softly. So in your in-hand work and stuff like that, you know, you might see me do a lot of close in-hand work, like the stuff that you want to do when you're teaching a horse to walk up on a horse float, where you get them to walk softly forward, backward, so they become like a really soft, you know, forwards, backwards sort of seesaw that they can just do it with you know, very floaty. So I think in hand on both eyes, just before you even ride it, you know, every day, and even just when you're walking out down the paddock and stuff like that, it's very important to offer your horse a lot of transition where they go from forward to back and forward to back and back to forward, and close in hand. So because some horses need a lot of time to prepare and then they sort of crash, but I start to get them to a stage that you can have them close in hand and you can just sort of be leading them and say, oh, can you back up now, and then come forward again, and you start to get a little bit sort of you know, get them so they understand, but then you get a little random in the sense that you say, oh, can you do it now? Can you do it now? And don't sort of have some sort of strict pattern or anything, because horses can follow a pattern and go, as soon as you get out of pattern, they get stressed. So what I guess you do is you just sort of say, you know, yeah, we walk on here and we'll just back up here and then come forward here. And sometimes I might even walk forward while I'm actually pushing my hand back, and you've got to back up while I'm walking forward. And basically what your horse will start to get to understand is it doesn't matter where your feet are going when you're standing, when you're on the ground, it's where the feel of that reine's going. And when you transfer that to riding, is the horse, you know, you're behind your horse's wither there and behind their head. So you know, they might get a strong forward thought and not want to transfer that into a backup. So if you've done a lot of that rocking forwards, backwards, transferring forwards to backwards on the ground, regardless of what body language is doing and things like that, your horse starts to really start to hone in on what it's listening to in the rein. And if they get really soft and loose in your hand and really floaty in their feet, then that's going to transfer under saddle. So when you get that under saddle, something you might want to start to look into is just taking a step forward and then rocking them back into a backup, and then from a backup go straight to forward and rocking them back into a backup again, and then maybe take 3 or 4 steps forward straight into a backup, and just work on that rocking horse until they're really rocking forwards and backwards, and then you just expand that. So eventually you sort of might be riding 5 or 10 meters forward into a backup and then forward again, and then until you feel no resistance. And then you'll get to a stage that if you rode 10 meters on a loose rein or 20 meters, then you've got to think, well, if I give my horse a loose rein and I let him out, my horse destinates. And what destinating is the horse is just casting its focus too far away. So if you sort of start to think that's my horse, so what happens is the horse, you know, if you start to think, well, I ride him 10 meters, then all of a sudden he just drifts away, then maybe you might ride him 9 meters and say back up again, and then keep going and work on it like that. And then slowly, you know, soon enough, you'll be so connected that anytime you pick up on the reins, you'll be there.
That's great, because Carolyn did actually follow up with another question, which we won't answer here, just because we've got to go on to the other questions, Carolyn, and we do limit it to 1 per member. But she did say, any suggestions for helping with separation anxiety? And I think you've kind of hinted that this all kind of links in, and there are loads of videos for you on the membership site on separation anxiety, Carolyn. So hopefully you can just delve into those. So the next question is from Trilby. It's a thinking question. She says, Mark, how do you let a horse think for itself? Can you go into a little bit more detail, please?
Oh, gee, how do I get so when you get a young wild horse or something like that, they're constantly thinking for himself. And as I was talking about earlier with the first question about my horse is dull to the flag, there's a horse in the background you just heard then thinking for himself, banging the side of the wall. But so horses think for himself all the time. It's how we set up boundaries. And one of the best sayings, the thing about sayings, years ago, I never really liked following any sort of one's method or anything like that, but there were some really cool sayings that I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed trying to understand them, and even though it might have took me quite a few years to really see how they sort of translate throughout all of our horsemanship. But one of the big sayings that really made sense, and that sort of it went hand in hand with that saying that you set it up for a horse to make its own decision or search and things like that, that some people, if they followed a bit of horsemanship, they would have heard that saying. But that saying is, you set boundaries, you don't bring your boundaries to your horses. And where that is so important is basically most horses are already searching, and if they search in the wrong direction, well, we can sort of put a bit of feel or firm up on a feel or put something there that sort of says that's not available, and then they try something else. And that's basically how we're setting up our training. So that's why, sometimes I'll use a flag or something like that, because the horse will start to look around and go, what could I do? And then if I had the weight of the rein or the weight of the rope in a certain direction, I might pop the flag and the horse searches, and it searches. If it searches back, it finds the pressure firms up. If it searches forward, it finds that the pressure releases a little, and until the horse follows the path of least resistance. So that's kind of an example of a horse, searching. I've got to try and think of a few other examples that are really common examples. So like when you're in an arena, okay, when you're riding, a lot of people like to make their horse go where they want to go, but the horse has got its own idea. It's got its own bucket list, for instance. So say, for instance, if you've already set up the idea that if you bump your legs or something like that, your horse is going to move forward, it's your job then to find out where the horse wants to go, because if you've said move forward, you shouldn't necessarily say move forward there, because then you take away all their options. But if you said move forward and then the horse goes, well, I'm going to move forward over here, well, you let them walk there for a few steps, and then once they've done a few steps over there, they've ticked off their bucket list. So then you might say, now, oh, by the way, but that door's closed, and you might take a feel, but the reins aren't just there to say door closed. The reins are there to open up a new direction. So you're saying door closed, but try over here. And the horse goes, oh, well, that didn't work. And they might walk in that other direction for a little bit, but then they'll quickly turn back and go, well, I would like to go back that way. And then you might go, well, you let them walk that way a little bit. And then you say, well, now let's take that rein again and say that's not available. Come over here. And then until after a while, the horse searches and goes, well, I might go this way because that seems like the path of least resistance. So it was I just don't know if you can hear that in the background, but there's a little cheeky horse that's coming up close to the stable, and I don't think the horse in the stable is very happy about it. But anyway, back to where we were. So what happens then is the horse goes, well, I might try this other side, because every time I went that way, that was not available, that door was closed. And they let go of that thought over there and they take on a new idea. And that idea is sort of more in line with your idea. So then you kind of go along together. And that's a good riding example, I guess, of setting up to a horse searches. Is sometimes you've got to set up a stimulant first to get the horse looking and thinking. And then all you have to do is you sort of set up the boundaries and rearrange the furniture in a way that your horse kind of finds its way to where you'd like it to be until it's underneath you. And slowly those boundaries, I guess, get closer and closer until the horse is underneath you and centered and following the feel of your ideas without, it's basically happy to follow you.
Getting a horse to search, I think, is one of the fascinating things to watch you do at a clinic. It is great to see, and quite novel to a lot of people. It's great.
Yeah, and there's so many scenarios that you can sort of set up a horse to search, and that's just a riding scenario. But but horses are searching all the time. And the one thing I think where I think sometimes we can fail them in training is make them obedient so quickly that they actually stop searching, and then they lose their try, and then we just have to carry them around with more pressure. And that's where people go to, bigger guns to ride their horses around, because the horses just get carried by pressure. They're not going towards their thoughts, they're just moving away from pressure. And that's the big thing that I'm really trying to sort of discourage. I'm trying to sort of say, hey, your horse is a big, strong, thoughtful animal, and we can just sit up there and go with them as long as we can set them up to make an idea that sort of that we're both on the same page, and they can do it for us. Why would you ride a horse if you had to carry him around all the time?
We could do a whole podcast on micromanaging, I think.
Oh, yeah. Helicopter horsemanship, I call it. It's a bit like helicopter parenting.
Okay, the next question is from Naomi. Naomi says she'd like to know how to teach her standardbred. He doesn't have to be in the front of a trail ride. He's the best boy, super safe, no spook, buckle, bolt, but he has to be in the front. He will walk faster or jog until he's in the lead, and then he's happy. He's also very forward. She doesn't dislike this. He's not worked up or anxious. She's just wondering if she can teach him how not to be in front.
Okay, if he's normally very forward, even on not on a trail ride, then a lot of horses I meet, they destinate a little in their walk, and they sort of have a strong forward thought in their walk. And it's and even though they can be nice horses and they don't seem like they're frightened of people and stuff, they've got used to coping by sort of putting their thoughts ahead and just going towards their thoughts in quite a fast manner. So they walk quite fast. And sometimes you talk about these, I talk about alpha mares, that sometimes as soon as they walk out the gate, they're thinking over the horizon and they walk really good. And the old stockman would have went, yeah, that's a good horse, that mare, because she can walk for days and we cover the ground. But in that mare's mind, sometimes she was a mare that was just sort of, she wasn't present. She was just over the horizon. And you get some horses that just kind of ride like that and do that. And then they'll tend to be up there and they're confident enough to lead. Some horses want to go to the front, but as soon as they get their ears out the front, they go, well, actually, I'd like to be second, because they're not that confident. But when you're sort of horse that just pushes up to the front, chances are if it's already a forward horse, not in a group, then you have to teach it how to do different walks as well. So like I've had a lot of horses that don't know how to walk soft and don't know how to walk slow. They always kind of evade things by just marching. So if you think your horse fits into that category, then what I'd say is don't teach them to march, as in teach your horse to take one step at a time in an environment when there's no horses, and teach him to walk slowly and until you can loose the rein and you can crawl, and then you can loose the rein and you can do a medium walk, and then you can loose the rein and you can do a fast walk, but you can do any one of those walks. And then you know he can do it. Otherwise, you're going to take him out on trail and he's going to be a horse that he only knows how to do a really fast walk, and then he's walks faster than all the other horses anyway, and he ends up in front, and that's where he wants to power off to. So you've sort of got to give him the tools away from the other horses a little bit. And then something I used to do, on trail with a lot of hot horses that used to want to sort of get up the front and things like that, I just let them trickle their way up the front, and then I just might ask them once they're up the front to ride forward. So I'd actually so by asking them with your legs to ride forward once they're up the front, it actually sometimes brings their thoughts back to you, and they go, oh, geez, you're pedaling me, aren't you? You're really pedaling me out. And they start to think a little bit. So you might ride him up quite a bit, maybe 5 meters in front of everyone. Then you might just do a Yui and just trickle him back into the mob and just let him come up the front, and then just ride him out again. And then but when he comes in a few horses behind, you might slow him up and just loose the rein and just see if he'll settle, and just try and settle in, a few pegs back from the lead, and then see what happens. And then when he starts to push up through there, you might just ride him up through. So instead of him just dragging himself up there with you, sort of with him not really thoughtful about you, you might have your legs on him. So he's going, gee, she's making me walk up through here. So you kind of draw his thoughts back to you a little bit. And then you get him out the front, and then you might just sort of maybe do a couple of circles out the front, so he's not just zoning out up there and he's not just off with the pixies. And then once he's sort of connected to you, just bring him back through and just let him trickle into the mob again. And then after a while, because you're sort of getting him to think a bit instead of zone out, you might find he might just start to settle in when you loose the rein behind the other horses. And the other thing which everyone that's listening to this have to be very careful of is if there's a horse that doesn't like kicking, it's so easy to, because horses, they go back to they're equines, and they are herd animals. And if you put a horse at the back of the herd, like a back of a trail ride, they will stop. They will slow down if they think that's where they're supposed to be. So sometimes, you know, I've experimented and had good success with just getting a sort of horse that doesn't kick and things like that, just to block a fast horse. And if you've got a friend that can just block them a little, it's almost like there's an alpha horse at the front saying, no, you're not to lead, you're tail end Charlie, mate. And once a horse resides to the fact that they're tail end Charlie, it's their responsibility as a horse to put their ears back and look for the danger behind them. So a lot of times if you put a horse right at the back and they know that the herd's told them to be there, they'll actually start to put their ears back and look behind them, opposed to just pushing to the front. He's just got used to taking the front as his spot. But if you put him behind and he thought the front was not available, you go, oh gee, I have to be the back one. And most horses I've seen, even really forward horses, once they reside to the fact that it's their duty to look after the herd by looking behind them, they'll just loose up on a rein and just stay there. So that's another thing to experiment that I think's worth trying, because it will work. But for everybody listening, you have to be very careful. You're not just going to put him up the rump of a horse that's going to sort of kick and hurt your horse. So you have to be a bit careful with that one. But it's a very powerful tool, using a herd to tell him, you know, where his place is for that moment. So he takes that natural responsibility of a herd animal.
That's really interesting that the solution there is coming from the horses, not from us telling them, no, they can't be at the front. That an effective solution is from the horses themselves. That's really interesting. That's all for today. So thank you very much, Mark. Thank you to all our members for sending those questions in. We've got more coming next week. We hope you can tune into us then.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening.